Yeah, nice to meet everyone. My name is Asif. I look after the advisory and innovation division of Pink Elephant. The innovation part is really exciting for me. The advisory part, yeah, I give advice in terms of best practice. I look at 3 frameworks, of course, your service management, project management, and governance. I've got a long history of service management. I've been in service management over the last 2 decades now. And because of that, I feel like the frameworks that we're introducing now complements what Pink Elephant has always been doing. So Julian mentioned XLA. We discussed XLA in the last breakfast session. And it's how do you transition from your service level agreements to your experience level agreements, thinking about that customer, and how do you take your customers along a journey with you. So design thinking is very much similar to that in that you're trying to get people involved in a process. We've got our first design thinking class coming up in July 12th. 14th to 16th July. We'd love to see everybody in that class. I'll take us a bit through exactly what the class entails, how the 2 days is facilitated, and who's facilitating that. Today's a master class, so it's really just an overview of what design thinking is. It's to get your minds thinking in a certain way, and it allows for you to take design thinking into your organizations to say, look, I heard about this framework and I think it's really going to help us solve specific problems, right? So today we want to look at understanding the DTMethod process. There's a specific process that has been developed by InProgress Labs, and it's accredited by APMG. It's called the DTMethod process. So design thinking is not something that's new. It's always been around. It's been around for a long time. However, a lot of organizations struggle with how to implement and how to facilitate the design thinking process. So what we're doing is we're bringing a course to the table that allows for you to facilitate that process of design thinking to ultimately solve complex problems in your business. Right? So what is design thinking? It's giving you the ability to solve any complex problem that you're finding in your business that there's no easy answer to. Example, high employee turnover, the ESCOM problem. There's no easy answer to these problems, and hence you use a specific process in order for you to get to a solution. But instead of you putting it into ChatGPT, you ask people for the solution. And the reason for that is because with a lot of the AI and advent of technology these days, there is solutions out there. However, the problem is to solve human behavior and human need. So the best people to ask is human beings, right? And that's what design thinking is about, is getting everybody to think in the mind of the customer, okay? The course that we're running is a 3-day course for foundation. It is design thinking introduction. It takes you through a few frameworks over day 2 and day 3, and then there's an exam after that. Day 4 and day 5 is for the professional certification, and that also gives you more insight into some of the tools that you use throughout the process. Okay. The examination for Design Thinking Foundation is similar to other APMG examinations. It's 50 questions, closed book, 40 minutes, and a 65% pass mark. And then the professional certification is more practical, so you're applying the tools that you learned throughout your course. So you're getting 4 questions, 80 marks for those 4 questions, and at the end of that, it's a 50% pass mark for professional certification. Okay, so that's the framework of what the course is about. What is design thinking? Who here has been involved in a design thinking process in your organization? Sorry, it's hot. I'm feeling hot. Anybody? No. Okay, well, let me ask it differently. What's your perception of what design thinking is? Any ideas?
Collect information and then design something based on that.
Amazing. Yes, that's what it is. It's a very evidence-based approach in order for you to get to a solution. It's whilst you're working with people, you understand that people have biases, so you allow for people to come up with ideas and solutions to problems. However, you kind of equip them with data. And the data is by doing interviews, by doing research, by doing desk side research, observations, etc. So on the basis of that, what I want to do is warm the class up a bit. I want to take us through a bit of an exercise. It's a riddle, so it's fun, right? The riddle, let me explain it and just bear with me because it's a complex explanation. Can you see the board from where I'm standing? Okay, so imagine this, right? You've got hostages buried in the ground up until their necks, right? They're buried in a straight line, whereas A can see B and B can see C. A can also see B and C, right? So A sees two people in front of him. Between C and D, there's a wall, right? So they can't see each other. Nobody can see what D is doing, right? And this wall separates D and C. Okay, so both C and D can only see their respective angles of the wall, right? Whereas A can see B and C, and B can see C, right? So far, we good, right? They can't turn around, so they can't see what's behind them, and they can't communicate, so they can't speak to each other, right? The executioner tells them that somebody needs to tell him what color hat he's wearing. Anybody needs to tell me the color of hat that you are wearing, and you need to get it right. And if you don't, execution, leave you to starve, whatever the scenario is, right? A minute into this exercise, somebody screams out the color of hat that they're wearing, and they get it right. The question that I've got is, who screams out the color of hat that they're wearing, and how did they get it right? Groups of 4. So just grab 4 people next to you. You four, Brian, join the F&B team. 3 and 4. Right. So let's give it 4 minutes. Yeah, let's give it 4 minutes. Have a conversation. Come up with concepts. No outside influences, right? So there's no mirrors. You can't shake the hat. You can't shake the hat off. You can't speak to each other. No other ways of communicating, right?
Buried from the neck down. Surely they can move their legs, right?
No, no. This is the rules, man. They're looking forward. That's it.
Were they told that there are only 2 colors?
Sorry. Yes, good point. So they were told that there's 2 red and 2 green. Sorry, important piece of information. So they were told that there's 2 red and 2 green, right? So they know that much. They need to figure out, somebody needs to figure out what color hat he's wearing, knowing now that there's only 2 red and 2 green. So they can see that much. 50-50 is a heavy chance to be taking on your life.
But the only certainty is if you could pick up as a pattern, but you wouldn't know if you can't see clearly.
That's true.
So A can see B and C, therefore he knows there is obviously one of the 2 left. B can only see
Did I not see
C.
this PPT before?
Yeah.
Because if B thinks that A has been quiet for such a long time, if A has been quiet for such a long time, he knows that A knows that A is not one or the other color. So because A is silent, B is actually giving the answer that actually the person behind
Yeah, he's silent.
He's indecisive because A is indecisive because he sees a green and red.
yes.
B sees the red and A is indecisive because A is also seeing.
How are you doing?
But he doesn't know who's behind.
You think it's A? Okay. We've got to lock in on the answer.
They know that there are other people in relation to each other.
No.
Does he
so
know? He doesn't
Does he know
know.
that there's a person behind him?
He knows that there's 4 hats.
He knows that there's
They know that there's 4 hats.
Do they know the color of their own hat?
No, that's what they need to tell us. So a minute into the exercise, someone tells, someone makes that conclusion as to what color hat they've got. Yes, they know that there's 4 hats.
So he would basically stay quiet because D would actually know that there's nobody behind him because nobody behind him would speak.
But they can't speak.
Yeah, no, there's nobody behind him to speak.
Yeah, so he is out because he won't hear him, right? He will be like,
They won't see nothing.
so
So it has to be A or C.
it has to
They
be
can't
A.
communicate.
Well, let's think about it like this. If we're standing behind each other, A, B, C, A keeps quiet.
That's all the info I've got for you. 4 hats. Everybody knows that there's 2 colors. They see what they see.
I'm just a fatalist and I'm just say, I'm red. You get killed.
Yeah, everybody's got a 50% chance, guys.
But B doesn't
I'm
support
saving the rest of you.
my argument.
You guys, yeah.
So you're participating.
Yeah.
Or yeah,
We have our answer.
You locked in? Okay. They locked in. Are you guys locked in?
let's go B.
You guys are locked in. F. Julian, you guys are locked in?
If B knew that A was behind, it would be different. So it would say that he's kind of and it would say A wouldn't be spoken of if my hat was
Well,
on.
let's go with this assumption that he does know.
Please excuse us at 10.
Okay. Cool. One of the key concepts in design thinking is failing fast and failing forward. Just go with it. Hi, good morning.
I'm just like thinking about it in the same sense that
Morning, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Nice to see you again. We started off with a riddle. Hey? Don't exclude D. All right, let's go. A. Why? Okay. Because of reasons. Got it.
We have B.
You got B.
Yeah.
And you guys had B. All right, let's start with A. What was the logic behind A?
So A has the most information at hand, but even so, it doesn't narrow down his options, so we guessed.
Right? He had a 50-50 chance of living, right?
It was a 50-50 and A is going to take the chance.
Yeah, you guys are gamblers. Why B?
Okay, so A can see both colors, which means that he knows it's a 50-50 chance. B can see C, which is just red. So if A had 100% certainty that there was the same color, he would have called it out. But B understands that
I can see both colors.
and hasn't said anything. So he knows he can see a red hat. He knows that he doesn't have a red hat because otherwise A would have said something.
Yeah.
Sure.
What's you guys' reasoning?
Exactly the same.
Pretty much the same.
Same reasoning.
Well, it's nice, but it doesn't mean he's alive.
Wait.
Yes, we had a reason.
Hey?
We're going on one piece of assumption.
Yeah.
Well, he does.
The one piece of assumption
One
is
second.
that we assume that A, B, and C know where they are in relation to each other. Without that information, this all becomes moot because
Correct,
A knows
correct.
B and C.
Correct.
B does not know that A is there, and does not know that silence is also an answer because he wouldn't know that there's somebody behind him. He
Correct.
wouldn't give an answer.
Correct.
So it's all in the assumption that they know that
Where each
A,
other are.
B, and C are aware that there is at least one person behind them.
So that assumption is right. Everybody knows in relation to where the other person is, right?
Yeah.
So in order to solve this problem, what you needed to do was to get into the mind of somebody else, right? The answer is right, so it's B, right? B has not as much information, he's only seeing one color hat. He's seeing a red hat. However, in his mind, he knows that if A was seeing 2 red hats, by now, a minute into the exercise, A would have scrammed green, right? And because A hasn't said anything in a minute into the exercise, that's the reason that B is certain that he's wearing a green hat. So well done. 2 teams. Well done, guys.
That really makes sense.
Yeah. So that is largely the premise of design thinking. It's being able to understand what your customer is looking for. And when I say customer, it may be external customer, maybe internal customer, right? But it's being able to understand and empathize with what is it that they are asking for, what is it that they need, what is it that they want. right? So there's 8 elements around design thinking, and these elements are human focus. And like I said at the beginning, with ChatGPT today, it's very simple to give it complex questions and expect an answer back. 9 times out of 10, the answer is relatively accurate. However, in the market, we understand that people are different, right? We are dealing with diverse customers, we are dealing with diverse natures, and because of that, when you put a design team together, asking that question to a design team, you won't just get a ones and zeros answer, but you'll get multiple answers to a solution that could possibly be the best answer to the solution. Whereas with AI, it's just one answer to a solution, right? Thinking by doing. So the other element around design thinking is very much like agile and project management these days. It's be brave to fail in your assumptions, because this is the framework at which you're allowed to do so. So you do what you think that you're going to be doing, and if it fails, you move forward from that, right? So fail fast, fail forward, entrepreneurship 101. No fear of failure, we've covered that to an extent. Visualization. So visualization, if I tell you to think of an apple, everybody thinks of a different apple, right? Green, red, rotten, fresh, yeah. However, if I show you an apple, we're all thinking the same thing. So design thinking has one of the concepts around constructing your solution, whereas you're prototyping the solution. So you're creating a prototype of what a solution should look like before you take it into the market. So you're using paper, you're using cardboard boxes, but you're creating a solution that you can touch and feel in 2D or 3D before you actually have the physical solution developed by the business. Okay? Integrative thinking is being able to allow multiple designers from different areas of your business into a design team so that you have different elements of thought when you're thinking about a solution or a problem, right? Cooperation goes without saying. In a design team, you want people to cooperate with each other as well as the stakeholders. Tolerance of ambiguity. So I'll take you through the double diamond framework shortly, but basically what it's telling you is that you're allowed to be ambiguous in both your problem and your solution before you zone into the solution. So don't be afraid of being ambiguous, don't be afraid of diverting from the problem. You're allowed to do so in this framework because eventually you're going to converge on that problem. Okay? And then exploratory and experimental in nature. It gives you the space and the time to be experimental because there's an objective at the end, whereas that's going to come to a physical solution. Okay. So I've covered those in detail. So this is the double diamond, right? The double diamond comes from the project management frameworks as well. Everyone will be familiar with it in project management. Divergent in a problem, a divergence in a problem allows for you to we have high employee turnover. It's a big problem, right? So that's the problem. It allows for you to get to causes and consequences of that problem as much as you need to. You are in a process at which you can document that problem with multiple different ideas and why it exists and how can we fix it and what's the causes of it. And you do that in a structured framework so that you're getting to a process at which you can then select exactly what the problem may be. Right? So it's important to note that the design thinking framework is set up in such a way that you've got a design team, right? You've got a design facilitator, you've got a design coordinator, and then you've got a design sponsor, right? So the design facilitator, the coordinator, and the sponsor are individual people, right? The facilitator may be you're putting together a design team because your CEO says, look, we've got this problem, I need you to use this framework to fix it. So you go to the organization, guys, we're putting together a design team. You get different people from different parts of the business, or however you structure it, not stakeholders of the problem. So they shouldn't be affected by the problem. However, they will be engaging with stakeholders throughout the process. Once you've put that team together, you're then structuring a 24 to 30-day sprint, right? So you're doing a 7-day sprint, another 7-day sprint, and another 7-day sprint, or 14 days, 7 days, 7 days. In those sprints, there's specific tools that you'll be using with your design team in order to get to a solution of that problem that the sponsor highlighted with you. But before you even start solutioning the problem, and it's very easy to start trying to solve something very early on, you're actually gathering data. So the first part of the process is gather data around the problem. So you do your qualitative research, your quantitative research, you do your interviews, you do your data analysis, etc. The facilitator allows for the design team, right? And it could be up to 15 to 20 people in that design team to each break up into different groups and then try and figure out the problem that you're trying to solve for eventually, right? So I'll take you through the different phases. You've got the exploration phase, the creative phase, and the construction phase. Each of those different phases have specific tools that you use in those phases in order to get to a solution. Okay, so I'm going to pause on this for a second because it is a lot. I'm sure there's questions. Any thoughts, questions around how this framework is covered? Because that's largely what design thinking is, to ultimately construct a prototype here to get to a solution on a problem. Yes.
You said, take for instance a 30-day sprint, break it up into sections, like 7-day sections.
Correct.
That way, basically, it's like iterative progression with feedback.
Correct.
Consistent feedback to see that you're on the right path.
100%. Yeah. So it's important to know that it's iterative. So it's a stepwise approach in that you start in exploration, you move to creative, and you get to constructing a solution, right? However, when you're constructing the solution, you identify that there's a problem with the solution, you're allowed to go back to exploration to see why does that problem exist and then go forward again. So it is iterative in that nature. Okay. So the design thinking method consists of 3 pillars, right? Which is the exploration phase, the construction phase, and the creative phase in the other order, right? It's got design thinking tools as part of that, and each of the different phases has different tools that you use in order to get to a specific outcome. And there's rules and roles within the design thinking method that allows for you to facilitate this, right? And this is the question that you had, right? The iterative approach, you see it there. When you get to the solution, when you start prototyping a solution, you may want to go back because you don't have all of the data that you need for that solution, right? Focus on people, we know that's important, team involvement, evidence-based approach. So when you very early on identify that there's a problem, or your stakeholder or your sponsor identifies there's a problem, you need to confirm that problem. It may be that CEO is, making some assumptions in his mind because he's got biases. So you need to, first things first, is try and understand whether this problem exists, what is the consequences of the problem, what is the causes of the problem before you start the process of actually moving forward, right? Stepwise approach. Each of the tools allows for you to get to a solution at the end. However, if you skip certain tools within the framework, you don't get the best outcome. In some instances, I've seen that at the end, you end up with like 100 different ideas to solve a specific problem. There's a tool called the RIG matrix that allows for you to prioritize from those solutions which ones to actually go forward with. So it's not feasible as a business to now start developing 100 prototypes and ideas around solving a problem of employee turnover. So that's why the tools are there in order for you to get to a priority level and focus on the solutions that actually make sense for the business. As mentioned, you've got the stakeholders that is outside of the process, the guys that are impacted by this problem. You've got the facilitator that coordinates the teams together. You've got the DT designers, which is largely the team. So the entire team consists of DT designers, and their job is to just think, right? Just think from their perspective of the problem and how to get to a solution of that problem. And it's structured in such a way that they don't need to be experts in the area that you're trying to solve for, because there's tools in order for them to solve for that problem, right? So the tools allows for them to just follow that framework to get to a solution, and they don't need to be experts in that specific subject matter, okay? So we've covered the exploration, creative, and construction phases. Those are the 3 phases that you go through in order to get to a solution. And this is how it's broken up, right? So you've got a 4-hour meeting very early on. Let's say we're starting a sprint now on the 1st of July. We have a 4-hour meeting. In that 4-hour meeting, there's specific things that we'll cover, right? In the middle of July, we'll have another 8-hour meeting, which is split obviously by lunch. 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, which we're covering certain things within the team, right? And then at the end, we have another 4-hour meeting. In between these meetings, there's a lot of work that's taking place by the DT designers, right? So they're doing desktop research, they're doing interviews, they're doing different elements of the process. They're following those tools in order to get to a solution. In the second break, they're actually doing prototyping of the ideas that they came up with in that 8-hour meeting in order to get to a solution and test that solution in the market. Okay. So let's just jump into some of these tools, and it's going to be a high level, so I think I'm good for time. So there's the challenge tree, and the challenge tree is to be able to delve into the problem. So this is during the initial phase, which is the exploration phase, right? You are covering all 7 of these tools during the exploration phase in order to be able to explore that problem, right? You are diverging, which means that you're going as wide as possible in the problem, and then you're converging as to, okay, these are actually what the problem statements are, and this is how we're going to get to a solution, right? So in that first exploration phase, you're not required to solution, you're required to understand the problem, all right? Hi, Ethel, how are you? Good, good. It's okay, there's the traffic. Okay, so the challenge tree. The challenge tree is there, as I mentioned. When you're facilitating this first meeting, you've got a problem statement from your CEO. Stick with the same example, high employee turnover. You've got a flip chart. You've got it broken down into 2 segments. One is causes, the other one is consequences. You break the team up. If you've got 15 people, you do 3 people per team, whatever the case may be. So you've got your designers in a meeting, and you've got 3 people per team, and you allow for them to now jot down on that flip chart what are the causes of the high employee turnover, and what's the consequences if we don't solve for this problem. Why is it happening? What does it mean that it is happening? What does it mean for the business? All of those consequences is what you write down on that flip chart. Once you've gone through that exercise, it allows for you to identify stakeholders. In that first meeting, you're now identifying stakeholders to this problem that exists. People that have left already, you want to look at the exit interviews, people that are still there but are not happy, what are the reasons for that, etc. You are then getting to a stakeholder list that you're going to start planning to how to gather data to the problem that you're experiencing or that you're trying to solve for. Okay. Desktop research, whereas you're doing a lot of data analysis, you're looking at industry, you're looking at different things, you're looking at what is the market telling us, is there a difference in economy, or what exactly is the problem that you're actually facing at the moment. You develop your questionnaires in that first meeting. So in that first meeting, you agree between your teams, what does the interviews look like, how do you facilitate those interviews, as well as what level of observation you want to do. On high employee turnover, it may not be observations that you're going to do per se, but it could just be employee satisfactions, and then you're sitting with different people in the organization, as an example. You're then taking those, right? Those are the data points that you're going to get. And in the second meeting, so you've now agreed, these are my stakeholders, this is what we're going to be doing, this team's going to be focusing on that team's going to be focusing on these needs, etc. So you've now agreed. You end the meeting there, which is the first meeting, and everyone goes off to do their work. Give them that 7 to 14 days to be able to gather as much data as possible in order for us to get to exactly what the problem is. You then come back into the meeting after the 7 to 14 days, and in the first half of that 8-hour session, you're now developing 2 things. One is a user story, and the other one is a matrix of needs, right? In the user story, you want to be able to document as a receptionist, as an example, right? I wish that I could work remotely, right? So that I could be with my family. Silly example, but that's why you have high employee turnover, because the receptionist wants to work remotely. You had 10 receptionists leave in the last year, things like that. But you're trying to develop user stories now in order for us to get to, okay, this is what my users are expecting from us as a business, right? When you're laughing, silly example.
It's just the example used there, yeah.
Yeah.
Receptionist, it's got to be
Work remotely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my mind wasn't minding there. All right, cool. But yeah, that's what you want to get to, right? So you develop these user stories. Again, you've got a flip chart, and you've created this matrix of needs on the flip chart. Everybody's got user stories, and you've got a lot of them because of the research that you've done. The user stories needs to be backed up by research, by data, by information that you've gathered over the last 7 days to 14 days. And very quickly, you'll pick up if the guys hadn't gathered that data, and in that meeting they're making assumptions to create some stories because they're assuming stuff, right? They need to be able to show you that they've done the research and this is exactly what it is, right? You then create this matrix of needs, and the matrix of needs is by two grids: importance and representativeness, right? How important is the given term from the perspective of the stakeholder? So high employee turnover means that we've got a lot of people leaving the organization. How important is that user story to the employees of the business, right? The second thing that you're looking for is representativeness. How many points of data did you get that confirms this, that correlates this? So you're trying to see that it wasn't just one interview that you did that came up with that theory. There should have been multiple that came up with the same theory. That means that it's across the organization, people are feeling this way, right? You're then pinning that on this grid on the top right hand side. You then got now all of these user stories here to say it's high importance and high representativeness, right? So obviously this is low, medium, high, and then low, medium, high. So whatever's in this top right and possibly in medium and medium are the things that's going to move forward. The stuff from here, you're going to bin, right? So we're getting to a priority list of things that we now want to move forward with. Okay, cool. So from that matrix of needs, second meeting, we are sitting at here before lunch. We've got to, these are the user stories, these are the needs of the business. Okay, we've covered this in the first meeting. They've done the research. We're now second meeting, half day through, right? We're now moving on to the second half of this of the second meeting, which is the creative phase. You're now taking those user stories that you've identified and you're moving into a let's ideate how we can solve this for the business. Okay. In the creative phase, you've got tools, multiple tools again. So we won't cover all of the tools in detail. However, these tools are there in order for us to ideate and get the best ideas out of the team to get to a solution. As I mentioned, by here, in a team of 15, you could end up with 100+ ideas to solve a specific problem. The solution or the framework creates like generative thinking. As an example, okay, before I go to that generative thinking, what we've done now is we've taken what was on the top right-hand side and we've created categories, right? So you've created different categories in order for you to now list where these user problems can solve into. How you, are you doing some construction?
Those upstairs people.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you've got these categories and you want to put ideas into the categories in order for you to streamline how you're going to be developing the solution. Once you've got categories, you're then allowing the team to create ideas around those categories, right? So as an example, you've got a team of 6 people. It's called a 6-3 method. However, your teams could be split. You could have 4-4-4, whatever the case may be. But the 6-3 method is you've got a team of 6 people. You've given them an instruction to come up with 3 ideas in 5 minutes, right? So how do I solve the high employee turnover? 6 people, each person takes a piece of paper and they write 3 ideas. As soon as she's done writing her 3 ideas, she hands the paper off to the next person next to her, and he needs to look at her 3 ideas, improve it, add to it, or add more to that list. And as soon as she's done after the 5 minutes, he needs to take those 6 ideas he's got on the paper, hand it over here, and similarly. And those papers are moving around. So in a team of 6 now, the first round you've got 18 ideas. The second round you've got another 18 ideas. The third round you've got another 18 ideas. So that's the generative thinking, because you're looking at other people's ideas and you're adding to that as well. And that's what expands this as much as it does, right? So you're getting as many ideas from people thinking and looking at other people's thinking process to get to a solution. But at this process, you are diverging to the solution. You haven't yet come to a prioritization list again. right? So we've prioritized the needs. Now we're going to diverge on the solution before we prioritize which solutions we're going forward with. Okay. And yeah, sure. Please do. Okay. Now that you've got all of these ideas and you've got a lot of them, you need to now eliminate the ideas that are identical, of course, right? Some people may have said just give people more money. A lot of people may have said that, right? Like 50% of the people may have said that. So let's just keep that as one idea, right? So now we've got 50 ideas left, right? So from the 50 ideas that you've got left, you want to cluster those ideas into specific clusters that allows for you to be able to now prioritize those clusters. In a cluster, it's not grouping, it's more so something that is complementing each other. So more pay plus time in lieu plus bonuses plus incentives, right? So those are one cluster of an idea. More money, right? But it's a cluster of ideas. Once you've clustered your ideas, you move on to a now, how, wow matrix. So the now, how, wow matrix is basically split up into grids again, easy to implement, difficult to implement, low originality, high originality, right? So you're taking those clusters, how easy is something to implement, you're taking the ideas and you're now putting it into this grid. Can we give people more money? No, that's difficult to implement, we don't have the money, so let's put it there, right? Is there something that we can implement now, time in lieu, etc.? You put it into the how. High originality, easy to implement, you put it in the wow. So you've gone through those ideas and you've agreed now as a design team, these things need to move into either here or there. Once you've done that, and you're still doing this during that 8-hour session, right? So you're now in that 8-hour session where you're trying to get all of this together. Once you've done that, you take whatever's on this side of the grid to move forward. Whatever's on this side of the grid, you're gonna either bin it, because this is the bin area, right? Difficult to implement plus low originality, we can't move forward with those ideas. Stupid ideas, let's move. So here is the now. Easy to implement, low originality. You're not taking it into the design thinking further because you can hand that over to business. Business, here are some ideas, go ahead and implement them. We think that it's easy to implement and you can do so now, right? The process of design thinking is not to develop solutions. It's to develop prototypes that business can implement, right? Because you're probably not going to be in a position to create stuff in that design team because you're not maybe decision makers of the business or whatever the case may be. So here you want to hand stuff over to business to say easy to implement and you guys can do so now. We are taking these ideas forward. With me so far? Cool. Now that you've got 50 ideas, it's too many still for a prototype, right? So you want to get to the best ideas. The process that you do here is a voting mechanism. So everybody votes for ideas, but each person only has 3 dots or 6 dots or 4 dots or 5 dots. So you can only vote 3, 4, 5 of the ideas that you really like, right? So all of the ideas on a flip chart, you've got 3 dots, you've got 3 dots, you've got 3 dots, you paste it wherever you want on the ideas that you're feeling for, right? Once you've done that process, now you want to take the top 10 or top 15 best or most voted ideas into the next element of where you're moving forward with, right? Everything else, burned again. You then go into prioritization matrix. In the prioritization matrix, you are putting ideas against each other and you're saying, okay, idea number 1 is best against idea number 2 or against idea number 3, etc. But you're now prioritizing those ideas against the other ideas in order for you to move forward, okay? And that's the end of that day. So you've now got ideas. These are the last 10 ideas that we want to now move forward with. We believe that these are the things that is going to solve the high employee turnover. Time in lieu, bonuses, work from home 2 days a week, or whatever the case may be. These are the best things that we believe is going to work, right? You're now going to tell the teams to create the prototypes for these ideas, right? You're also going to ask for them to, so we're moving into the construction phase, right? You're going to ask for them to either develop a policy or a prototype of a policy, do some research, do some interviews, and test your prototypes in the business as well. So you go back into business, and now you've got these prototypes that you need to test with the business to agree that, okay, these are the best things for the business to move forward in solving these problems, okay? In the construction phase, There's the prototyping and there's the testing. The most important things is the prototyping and the testing. However, very early on in construction, there's a process called a build, break, repair. In the build, break, repair, we've got 10 people in the room, we've got 10 ideas left. Each person writes an idea to the most descriptive point of that idea. So they're writing that idea down to the point of this is exactly how it should be, one page idea, basically. They hand that idea over to the person next to them to say, this is the idea that I'm working with, what do you think about it? The person next to them's job is to break that idea, to write all of the reasons the idea doesn't work, right? And in that 5 minutes, he does so and hands it over to the person next to them on the other side. That person's job is to fix what the middle person broke, okay? And then you've got to a prototype now, whereas you've tested it in the design team to say, okay, this is how we're going to make it work because we've addressed all of the risks within this idea. And then you move on to the prototyping, you test, you do your 2Ds, you do your 3Ds, you do some videos, you do some documentation, etc. as part of the design team, because this is what you're testing in the business. You then allow for the business to test it. So there's 3 elements of testing, which is your alpha testing, your beta testing, and your gamma testing. Your alpha testing is the design team tests that prototype. Beta is that the business tests it, and then gamma is the actual users test it in order for you to get to the solution that you're going to take into the market. And that's the end of the foundational level design thinking process. So it's basically taking you through that 1 month sprint, 3 meetings to get to a solution through a team and facilitating that entire process. Okay. Right, so obviously we've got the course coming up on the 12th of July. I think you missed that part, Ethel, you missed it as well. So we've got a foundational course, we've got a professional course, and then we've got the facilitator course as well. Each of these covers different tools, they cover different frameworks, they cover different elements of how you can implement design thinking within your business. What it gives you is the ability to go back to business and to be able to start a design sprint because you understand the tools. Your team doesn't necessarily need to be on the course because you'll facilitate for them to get to a solution at the end of the process. Okay, any questions?